everyone, this is Maki. Who do you think is the strongest pilot in the Gundam Seed series? A lot of people think that Kira, Athran, and Shin are extremely equal, with the outcome of their battles depending on the situation. Char and Dogfight, who appeared in Seed Freedom, are also incredibly powerful pilots. Especially Char, who was described as the strongest pilot in director Mitsuo Fukuda's planning stages. Some Japanese fans think that the boosted men who appeared in Seed might actually be incredibly close to being the strongest, as they were able to counter freedom and justice with their inferior Gundams. This time, let's analyze the scene where the protagonist Kira fights both Dogfight and Char at the same time. Please be aware that this analysis contains many spoilers from the movie. Today we will analyze up to the point where Ross meets Kira. Are you ready? Please hit the subscribe button and activate the Ziggurat of the Big Dragoon system. A barrage of gunfire is unleashed that would make even the often stunned Bright Nor, who often scolds his crew for seeing firepower, smile. Queen Nora of the Foundation Kingdom harbors a deep hatred for Kira. In the novel, it is mentioned that Kira's father, Yulen Hibiki, despised Ora's research as arrogant. This event triggered Ora's intense animosity towards Kira. In addition, Ora transformed into a girl after being exposed to a drug she used for her research. This transformation was not instantaneous, but occurred over a long period of time, during which her cells bones and internal organs gradually changed. Ora endured unimaginable pain and fear during this transformation. Of course, the internal organs include the brain. Queen Ora's childish behavior may be a reflection of the changes in her brain. In the battle we are analyzing this time, Queen Ora's strong hatred for Kira is evident. Observing this aspect might make it even more interesting. The Ziggurat, commanded by Black Knight Squad Char, fires an enormous number of missiles and beams. Enthusiastic fans have counted 4,108 missiles fired at Strike Freedom. It's important to note that this is the number they were able to count. In the final battle, there are moments when the scene cuts to other characters fighting. Even then, Kira and his allies continue to fight. This means that there were actually more attacks on Strike Freedom. At this point, Kira Yamato has already won. Do you know why? Kira's ultimate goal is to neutralize the massive beam cannon Requiem. There is no need to win battles using mobile suits. What would have happened if an attack powerful enough to be difficult for Strike Freedom to dodge had been aimed at the Orb or Campus armies? Destroying Requiem, or the flagship of the Foundation army, would have been much more difficult. Kira ensured Campus's victory by drawing the enemy's attention to herself. Just before the final battle, Queen Nora was provoked by Kira and decided not to fire Requiem at all. Afterwards, she sent out the Black Knight Squad Char, an extremely powerful weapon, just to defeat Kira alone. Had Gilbert Duano been in command instead of Or, he would have prevented Dogfight from being used to defeat Kira. Since Char alone could sufficiently stop Strike Freedom, there was little reason to use Char. In addition, childish rage sealed the Foundation Kingdom's defeat. Ora Maka Haber's exposure to anti-aging drugs and Blue Cosmos' execution of the colony Mendel Wade incident were the main factors that influenced the outcome of this battle. The very reason for their defeat was exactly what Dogfight told Kira: humans get in each other's way with their ridiculous ideas. Kara arrives at Strike Freedom's battle against Shiver. When he activates the Wings of Light and the Dragoon system, they glow red, though the reason for this color is currently unknown. A popular theory among fans is that it might be due to the Voyager Lumiere technology. I agree with this theory. It makes sense that Color, an advanced mobile suit, would be equipped with the powerful Voyager Lumiere propulsion system. Noticing that the enemy's Dragoon system has been activated, Kira unleashes his seed ability. Even when fighting Shiva alone, he was in a dangerous situation, so he probably decided that it would be difficult to defend without it. Strike Freedom also activates his Super Dragoon. 4 beams are fired simultaneously from Kara's Dragoons. These weapons are similar to those used in Providence Gundam and Legend Gundam, and their design motif goes back to the Zeong of the original Gundam. If you look closely at the beams fired by Kara's Dragoons, you notice the scattering of particles. The beam weapons of the Seed series use plasma energy, unlike the ultra-high temperature particle weapons of the Universal Century series. In this scene, however, the particles appear to be scattering. The latest weapon, operated by the secret organization Terminal, mounted on the arms of Ziggurat, is called the Mega Particle Cannon. It is possible that newly developed technologies are being used in beam weapons. Of course, we must not forget that it could simply be staged. Kara's Dragoons surround Strike Freedom. An immense number of beams are fired, and Kira is busy dodging them. However, as I mentioned earlier, Kira has already secured his victory at this point. He has achieved the Kara's Dragoons do not attack the old fleet result. Kira's Super Dragoon attacks Kara. At this point, Kara has not produced any decoy using clones. Shiva dodges Kira's shots by creating decoys and directing fire at them. In this scene, Ophi dodges Kira's attacks using only her piloting skills without using decoys. It's unknown if Kara is equipped with the decoy ability. It's also unclear if they would intentionally leave out such a powerful feature. Of course, this is just my personal speculation, but if Kara's operational purpose is to destroy enemy fleets, it might not be surprising if she lacks the decoy ability. Ophi's piloting skills to dodge Kira's shots without using decoys may exceed Shura's. Strike Freedom defends against Kira's sword attack with her beam shield. Ophi says to Kira, "You miserable wretch." Kira replies, "What did you say?" This exchange is exactly the same as the dialogue between Char Aznavour and Amaro in Char's Counterattack. Amaro says to Char, "You pathetic wretch." And Char replies, "What did you say?" Kara and Strike Freedom try to attack each other with their Dragoons. Kara's Dragoons seem to be able to change the direction of their propulsion energy at will. They generate lateral thrust while maintaining a firing angle toward the enemy. There is also a scene where thrust is generated from the beam saber position when braking. This could indicate a structure that combines the beam cannon and Voyager Lumiere generator. Alternatively, they could be using the energy for beam generation as a braking mechanism. Strike Freedom retreats with its beam shield up. The Dragoons are positioned around his, focusing on defense. This is Kira's first fight against Color. He emphasizes defense in the fight to understand the capabilities of this unknown enemy. The battle between the Dragoons begins. This is also a reenactment of the battle described in Char's Counterattack. Ophi can read Kira's mind. Kira's Dragoons dodge the beams fired by Strike Freedom's Dragoons with extremely small movements. In contrast, Strike Freedom's Dragoons dodge Kala's beams with larger movements. Kala's Dragoons can fire multiple beams at the same time. In Gundam Unicorn, the strategy of using scattershot was introduced as an effective countermeasure against long-range weapons. Kala's Dragoons also make effective use of their ability to fire multiple beams. Finally, one of Strike Freedom's Dragoons is destroyed. Another Dragoon, separate from the ones firing, deploys a beam saber and attacks. This is the first time Kira has seen this weapon. If Kira hadn't focused on defense, Strike Freedom itself might have been destroyed by this beam saber. Even though he lost a Dragoon, it's clear that Kira's strategy isn't wrong. Kira tries to attack Kala's Dragoon that destroyed his, but it's destroyed by another of Kala's Dragoons. This is the same tactic introduced in the previous episode, mechas strategy. It combines decoy and attack rolls to ensure the destruction of the enemy. Another Dragoon is destroyed. After being destroyed by the beam saber, it takes a direct hit from a beam. It's likely they're attacking with both beam sabers and beam cannons at the same time, ensuring that even if one attack is dodged, the other will still hit. Alternatively, it could be that Ophi, who hates Kira, is attacking him more than necessary. Strike Freedom recalls its Dragoons. Then she grabs the railgun. Kira plans to monitor the enemy's movements and launch a counterattack. Kira shouts the performance of a mobile suit does not determine strength. This is another line that carries the legacy of Char Aznavour's words. Char once said, "I will prove that the difference in mobile suit power does not determine the outcome of battle." Kala's Dragoons attack Strike Freedom. Kala's Dragoons appear to be able to fire beam cannons while simultaneously activating beam sabers. Kira counterattacks with her beam rifle and railgun. The first attack is dodged. However, this may be part of Kira's plan. The weapon on his right arm is a beam rifle. It won't penetrate Femtech armor. It's unclear if Kala's Dragoons are equipped with Femtech armor at this point. However, it is revealed that Femtech armor doesn't use energy. If it doesn't use energy, it wouldn't be surprising if Kala's Dragoons were equipped with Femtech armor. Kala's Dragoon appears on the right side of Strike Freedom. Perhaps it thought it would be safe on the side where Kira is holding the beam rifle. However, Kira crosses his arms and destroys Kala's Dragoon with the railgun on his left arm. He then attacks Shiva with the beam rifle on his right arm. This moment was the Foundation Kingdom's best chance to defeat Kira. The beam rifle has no effect on Shiva, who is wearing Femtech armor. Therefore, if Shiva had continued to attack Strike Freedom while taking the beam rifle shots, Shiva would have won. However, Char prioritized enjoying the fight against a strong opponent and winning elegantly. He chose the unnecessary action of dodging the beam rifle. If Char had attacked with the same determination that Kira had when he defeated Providence Gundam, Strike Freedom would have been destroyed. The Dragoon attacks stopped, and both Kala and Shiva launched simultaneous sword attacks on Strike Freedom. This scene shows Ophi and Char using Echo's abilities to coordinate their attacks. The speed of their attack is so great that Kira has no choice but to focus entirely on defense. Wolfie responds to Kira's earlier statement, a mobile suit's power is not what determines its strength. He says exactly that's why you, a member of an inferior race, will be defeated. Kara's attack destroys 2 of Strike Freedom's Dragoons and 1 of its wings. Strike Freedom begins to fall toward the lunar surface using Voiture Lumiere. In reality, this maneuver is not due to the impact of the attack, but rather Kira's control descent to the moon. He falls with Voiture Lumiere activated. If you want to slow down, it is better to cut Voiture Lumiere. Kira is actively controlling his speed of his own volition. A red-aiming laser locks onto the falling Strike Freedom. Wolfie and the others seem to plan to use their numerical advantage to launch an attack against Kira, who is resistant to attacks more than expected. Kira begins evasive maneuvers on the moon's surface. He deploys his Dragoons and creates a barrier. This feature was first used in Seed Freedom, possibly inspired by Akatsuki's weapons. By flying close to the lunar surface, Kira avoids attacks from below. After experiencing the coordinated attacks of Kara's Dragoons and Shiva, Kira decides to use the surrounding terrain to her advantage. You can see Dragoons with beam sabers in the air, performing shooting attacks. If they were to attack with beam sabers in this state, they would crash to the ground. The powerful propulsion generated by Voiture Lumiere turns out to be a weakness in this scenario. A powerful beam attack will cause an explosion on the lunar surface. The image of a Gundam flying amidst the exploding ground is a nod to Char's Counterattack, showing respect for past works. While depicting Kira and his tactics, Director Mitsuo Fukuda's own strategy is also executed. Kara and Shiva's targeting lasers activate the Ziggurat. A massive missile barrage is launched with over 4,000 missiles heading towards Kira. The trajectory of these missiles is a highlight, carefully crafted by the computer graphics team. In space, sparks don't dissipate immediately, they linger, creating beautiful trails from the rocket engines. Kira, shouting his love for Lars, initiates a full burst attack. But he cannot destroy all the missiles. As Wolfie's anger grows, the missiles approach Strike Freedom. At this point, Strike Freedom may be starting to run low on energy. Kira activates the Dragoon barrier again, but this time it's smaller. In addition, one of the Dragoons creating the barrier is destroyed. A single beam destroys the Dragoon. Although Kara's Dragoons can fire multiple beams, doing so here could destroy the Ziggurat's missiles. So they fire the minimum number of beams needed. This may be one of the few scenes where Kara's beam rifle is used. Strike Freedom counterattacks with her head-mounted Vulcans and railgun. However, a missile hits him from behind, knocking him off balance and destroying his beam rifle. Kira activates a much larger beam shield for defense. While it successfully blocks the Dragoon's beams, the intense light obscures his vision, allowing Shiva to close in. 2 consecutive attacks from Shiva further destabilize Strike Freedom. At this moment of imbalance, a rocket attack hits directly. Kira steps on the pedal and manipulates the lever. However, a warning appears on the monitor. He tries to use Voiture Lumiere to quickly put distance between himself and the enemy. He activates one of his few remaining weapons, the Beam Saber. Kara's Dragoons keep up with the fast-moving Strike Freedom. Shiva attacks just as Kira's speed is slowed by a beam attack. Kira counterattacks with the railgun, but ends up firing out the decoy using clones. He tries to fire the railgun again, but again aims at where the decoy was. Shiva's attack, aimed at the cockpit, destroys the belly beam cannon. Kira appears to have narrowly avoided the direct hit to the cockpit. Strike Freedom descends to the lunar surface again. This time, Kira holsters the beam saber and holds the railguns in both arms. He intends to retaliate against Kara's dragoons with the railguns. However, he avoids the attack due to the rapidly approaching Shiva. He had his weapon ready, but Shiva, who could read minds, stopped him. Kira manages to defend herself with a beam shield, but is hit by another missile attack. This attack causes him to lose a railgun and a wing. But did you notice? Kira also took the previous missile attack on his back. As mentioned in the previous episode, Kira's goal is to buy time. He needs to buy time for Lars to expose the Foundation Kingdom's massacres to the world, and for the Oak Free to destroy Requiem. He also needs to buy time for the completion of the Proud Defender. Kira's goal is to protect his main body by absorbing missiles with the wings on his back, and to hold out until the Proud Defender is completed. He consistently defends against all these and shoots frontal attacks with the beam shield. Shiva's destruction of the abdominal beam cannon may have been the moment when Shiva's offensive skills surpassed Kira's defensive abilities. In the scene where Kira defends against Kara's sword attack, the beam shield is very small. It keeps energy consumption to a minimum. Kira may be getting used to Orphe's piloting skills and Kara's attacks. As Kira defends against Kara's attacks, he tries to use the hip rail cannons. However, Orphe seems to have anticipated this move. Kara deflects the beam shield with her sword and gains distance. The moment the rail cannons are deployed, one is destroyed by Shiva. As she turns to face Shiva, Kira takes another missile hit in the back. Another warning message appears on the cockpit monitor. Strike Freedom, flying over the lunar surface, now has only one active Voyager Lumiere unit. The speed at which it can be used also appears to have decreased considerably. Kira counterattacks with the remaining rail cannon and railgun. The pose of holding the railgun with both arms is iconic and reminiscent of the original Gundam. Strike Gundam also had a similar pose. Shiva flew close behind Char, hiding his presence and waiting to attack at any time. Char is skilled at hiding his weapon with his own body. It seemed he was putting that technique to use here. Kara attacks while flying across the surface of the moon. He dodges Kira's shots and attacks with her sword. Kira again blocks the sword with her beam shield. He desperately counterattacks with the rail cannon, but Orphe seems to have gotten used to this attack and dodges it. At this point, Kara activates the belly beam cannon. This is the first time Kira has seen this weapon. Despite his intense anger, Orphe had reserved this powerful weapon. He also maintained the composure to hide his trump card. Kira successfully defends against the abdominal beam cannon with the beam shield, but the missile hits the ground, causing a massive explosion. As a result, Strike Freedom loses the railgun as well. The display of the cockpit monitor is also distorted. Director Mitsuo Fukuda mentioned the display was meant to show that Strike Freedom had reached its cooling limit rather than running out of power. In fact, If it were a power drain, the screen would probably go blank rather than distort. It appears that the entire unit has reached its cooling limit, causing the instruments to overheat. Eventually, Strike Freedom's phase-shifting armor reaches its limit. But even now, Kira manages to concentrate the damage on the wings by crashing backwards into a structure. With the phase shift armor down, Shiva begins to attack Strike Freedom. Kira faces her greatest danger. But then Ziggurat protects Kira. Athran, who delivered Lars to the battleship Millennium, returns to the battlefield. Albert and Lars also rush the Proud Defender to Kira. Kira's plan to buy time has barely worked. The sight of Strike Freedom withstanding Kara's attacks is very cool. It beautifully continues the legacy of the original Gundam's depiction of a battered robot looking cool. After that, Athran and Kira launch a powerful counterattack against the enemy. We will cover this battle in the next episode. Thank you for watching until the end. See you in the next episode.